Squatting Slav TV.
If you've been active on social media in recent weeks, then chances are that you've already been bombarded by countless posts from normies praising the latest Netflix hit movie, Bird Box. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, the movie revolves around a mysterious evil force which decimates the population by prompting those who see it to immediately commit suicide. In Bird Box, Sandra Bullock stars as a woman named Mallory who embarks on a lengthy blindfolded journey to a sanctuary which is allegedly immune to the effects of the horrific epidemic. While the movie may come off as just another mainstream horror flick to the average viewer, the reality is that Bird Box revolves around blatantly obvious themes of anti-whiteness and cultural Marxist leftist propaganda. Although Netflix has long been known for blackwashing and forcefully diversifying its material, the Bird Box movie goes a step further in its obvious attempt to inferiorize, demonize, and belittle white people at every step of the way. Despite the fact that progressives are hailing the movie as a cultural masterpiece and an eye-opener for racist white people, the truth is that Bird Box unshamingly resonates the anti-white attitudes echoed by many of the Marxist globalists in the US. The movie, which was directed by a Danish Jew by the name of Suzanne Bier, is essentially a cultural Marxist anti-white hit piece used to highlight the state of social and cultural decay in white America. In this video, I'll refer to specific parts of the Bird Box movie to point out its blatantly obvious anti-white propaganda, and I do recommend that you watch it, if you haven't already, to see if you can spot out some of the recurring themes that we're going to be speaking about in this video. In the opening of the movie, we learn that Sandra Bullock, or Mallory, is pregnant and that her significant other has left her somewhere in the recent past. Like many leftist middle-aged women, Mallory is skeptical about her pregnancy and about keeping the baby, and considers giving it up for adoption before it's even born. She even goes as far as to refer to her pregnancy as a condition and dreads the idea of having to share her life with another human being. Simultaneously, Mallory brags about how she doesn't need a man to take care of her future child and that she's more than capable of handling the situation on her own. Essentially, Mallory is portrayed as the stereotypical progressive leftist white woman whose selfishness takes priority over having children and a family, and it's blatantly obvious that Mallory embodies many of the traits of today's white feminists. Clearly, Mallory don't need no man to raise a child, and babies are simply disposable objects which women can give up for adoption should they not feel up to the challenge of raising them. Mallory's life situation is obviously symbolic of crumbling white American family values, and the director uses her to mock the fact that white Americans are weak and irresponsible when it comes to having children, and when it comes to having committed relationships. Going forward, we quickly learn that the horrifying epidemic is quickly spreading across the world and that mass suicides are happening as a result of some horrific evil force in countries all across the globe. While watching the news, Mallory learns that the epidemic originated in Russia and automatically goes on to blame the Russian government for perpetrating the terror. To the average person, this may not seem overly significant, but the reality is that Mallory is echoing the same anti-Russian sentiments of the Trump-hating globalist establishment. As the movie continues, Mallory is rescued from the epidemic by a group of strangers who allow her to seek refuge in a large house which is boarded up to prevent them from seeing the outside world where the evil force thrives. Amongst a vibrant, diverse group of survivors in the house, we find a gay Asian man, a Latin police officer, 2 white women, one of whom is pregnant, 2 black men, and an elderly old white man. Despite their differences, the survivors begin to form various romantic interracial relationships, and Mallory begins to lust for one of the black men in the house named Tom. From the time that Mallory enters the house, Tom is portrayed as the alpha black male, and Mallory sees everything in Tom that she didn't see in her previous white partner who had abandoned her during her pregnancy. As the group fights for their survival, tensions arise between the elderly white man Douglas and the rest of the survivors following several small altercations. In the movie, Douglas is portrayed as a stereotypical dumb white American Republican who is disliked by both the white and minority survivors alike and is clearly symbolic of Donald Trump. At one point, he drunkenly tells Mallory that he wants to make the end of the world great again, playing on the popular anti-Trump rhetoric used by leftists in recent times. When a stranger shows up to the house begging to be let in, an argument breaks out between Douglas and the rest of the survivors, after Douglas voices his concerns over letting the man in. Despite Douglas's reluctancy, the stranger is allowed into the house by the other survivors who don't perceive him as any kind of threat. Director to mock President Trump for refusing to allow potentially dangerous strangers into the country, despite pushback from progressives for open borders who see no threat in welcoming in criminal migrants. Shortly after, Douglas pays the price for falling to the pressure of the other survivors and is brutally murdered by the backstabbing stranger, who we come to learn is possessed by the evil force. Simultaneously, Mallory and the pregnant woman give birth to a boy and a girl in the house at the same time, and the other woman is also brutally murdered by the stranger moments after delivering her baby. Mallory and Tom then adopt the baby of the murdered woman and continue their quest for survival along with Mallory's biological newborn child. As Mallory, Tom, and the two infants continue their journey, Tom asserts the role of the caring father figure and husband and selflessly takes in both of the white children as his own. Once again, we're bombed with the idea that white men make weak father figures who abandon their partners and unborn children, and that white women can only find true alpha males by pursuing interracial relationships. The idea that minorities are more altruistic and caring than whites is also heavily emphasized, and Tom is essentially portrayed as having all of the positive traits which the white people in the movie lack. When the family stumbles upon an old abandoned house, they're informed via a remote radio transmission that there's a sanctuary down the river from them which is immune to the effects of the epidemic. At one point during their stay at the house, the family is attacked by a group of vicious armed white men, and Tom decides to defend the family from the attackers out in the open with no blindfold on. During the altercation, Tom shoots and kills all three of the evil white men and is then induced into committing suicide after the evil force prompts him to shoot himself. Once again, this recurring theme of whiteness and evil is pushed onto the viewer, and yet again the minority is hailed as the heroic figure whose self-sacrifice ensures that the weak, selfish white people have a shot at survival. Following Tom's death, Mallory and the children manage to embark on their journey down the violent river in a small raft and succeed in fighting off more violent white attackers prowling in the river. After barely making it down the rapids, Mallory and the children reach the sanctuary and quickly discover that the heavily walled facility is a school for blind children. After being reassured that they can remove their blindfolds by one of the blind caretakers, the family discovers a beautiful garden full of blind adults and children. Unsurprisingly, the majority of the blind residents congregating in this utopian sanctuary garden are visible minorities of different races and backgrounds, and it's made clear that they're blind to each other's differences. In fact, only Mallory and her two children are able to see and embrace these differences, and only now in this diverse utopia are they safe to see life freely with no blindfolds on. Obviously, this closing scene conveys the message that whites will only be able to see and appreciate the world for all its beauty if they choose to embrace life in a diverse society. Although Netflix has long been known for spewing out movies oozing with cultural Marxist and leftist propaganda, the Bird Box movie further confirms that anti-white sentiments have successfully been pushed to the forefront of mainstream pop culture. Now more than ever before, concepts such as forced diversity, interracial relationships, and the inferiorization and demonization of whites are being maliciously overused in order to melt away the glue that holds together Western white values. Bird Box, which has been widely embraced and foolishly hailed as a masterpiece by the masses, is clear proof that we have been completely conditioned to the detrimental propaganda which directly targets us.